Welcome to Dots of Love Canada's YouTube tutorial. If you can do me a favor today, like, comment, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to my brand new channel. I'd love for you to go ahead and screenshot these example mandalas. They'll help guide you today and you'll be able to look back as you create your own 6-inch mandala. Hey, it's Colleen from Dots of Love Canada. Welcome to my mandala tutorial video today. If you have purchased one of my DIY kits, this is the video that's going to be walking you through step by step. If you would like to purchase one, they are available on my Etsy shop. You can check the link below in the comment section for the details. So there's 2 color palettes available in my current DIY kit. One is the boho soft and one is the vibrant colors. If you are following along today on your own, you can choose to do any colors if you'd like, but I will quickly run through the colors that these ones are if you would like to select the same. Most importantly today, keep in mind that you are creating a piece of art, not copying. So yes, you are going to copy step by step my tutorial. However, it is your own creation. So you can take the liberties today on design elements, on colors. Just keep in mind you don't have to do it exactly as mine. And even though you're following a step-by-step tutorial, everybody will have slight variables in the paint they're loading on their tools, the pressure they're applying, and so they will turn out slightly different. And that's really the beauty of it. It will be your own personal mandala. So today I am using a 6-inch wood slice. I have base painted this with Folk Art multi-surface satin and black. I do recommend using a multi-surface paint when you are base coating, as it cures to your surface, in this case wood, ensuring that it is really cured on there. And I do like using a satin finish because it has a little bit of sheen. So when we do go over to put our guidelines down like this, it's not going to stick. I find with the matte, the chalk or watercolor pencils can embed in there a little bit. So once it's painted black, I then use a stencil. There's lots of stencils on the market. I really love this Happy Dotting Company silicone stencil. I use it on everything, on my mugs, plant pots, anything wood, even I've done up to 22 inches. This is how I start the center. You can use a chalk pencil or a watercolor. I prefer a white watercolor pencil. They wipe off very easy with a baby wipe, a microfiber cloth that's damp, or a Q-tip and water. And I have already placed the guidelines on if you have purchased the DIY kit. If not, you'll just want to put a stencil down and go ahead and fill it all in. I do recommend once you lift it up that you connect your lines. You can either use a ruler to do that or simply just with your pencil. And then same with the circles. You can connect them around or you can use a compass. I just use one from the dollar store, the Friska's compass, and I like to have quite a bit of lines. When I started, I did hardly any guidelines, but now as I have had a lot more time to spend with this art form, I definitely see the benefit of having your closed circles and lines and having more than fewer so that it can really help with the symmetry of the piece. We are going to be using acrylic rods today. So if you have purchased the DIY kit or been gifted one, you will have a set of clear rods, acrylic rods, so you can line them up largest to smallest. These are your pretty standard dotting tools. They're also used, the stylus is for nail tools. Sometimes the rods come colored, but it's very easy to see the largest down to the smallest. And then with the stylus, these have a stainless steel tip on each ends. Same thing, you'll want to line them up largest to smallest. And so for this set specifically, it is green, blue, white, pink, yellow. And you'll notice, I'll open them up here, you'll notice that one side is always all the same on the acrylic tools. So you're going to use the large end of the green, blue, white, and then you're going to use the small end of the pink and of the yellow. And sometimes the pink or the white is the smallest with these ones, but you'll notice that on the one side they're all the same size, and then on the other end you want to line them up largest down to smallest. Sometimes the two smallest ones can look quite similar, but you will notice that your smallest one has a more oblong tip. It's not as round, and this would be considered your micro dot. So if you do have a different set, just take a moment to line them up smallest to largest, or if you're using a different set of tools, that's okay too. So the other thing to mention, if you have purchased the DIY kit and are following along, you also will have a QR code in your lid, the lid of your box, to my Mandala dot painting guide. So I would suggest giving that a read before you get started. It has really great information on the basics of dot painting, the tools, the paint consistency, the techniques, and even accounts and tutorials to follow if it's something that you want to continue trying. If you would like to have my guide, the link is below in the comment section. You can sign up with your email and receive it for free. So let's talk about the palettes. If you have got the Vibrant one that you will be doing today, the palette in your kit will look like this. And these ones here are Magenta, all by Decor Americana, Purple Pizzazz, Lavender, Amethyst, which is a metallic, Peacock Teal, and Teal Mint. Okay? And what we're going to do is I will be referring to these as 1 through 6. So no matter which palette you're using, if you're creating your own, I curate the palettes in a really easy way that we can interchange them. And I will say color number 1, color number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it will give you a really fantastic, dimensional, beautiful mandala. Okay, so if you are doing the Vibrant, this is your palette that you will be using today. Okay, and if you are doing the boho soft, then you will have this palette here. Your first color will be Cactus Flower, your second Blush Pink, your third Laurel, your fourth Thicket, your fifth color Laguna, and your sixth color Bahama Blue. Okay, and this is the palette that I will be doing the tutorial with. But again, I will be using the colors by number. So you know on your lid, it will say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you are creating your own palette at home, then you can set yours up like that too. So let's talk for a moment about the color palettes, especially if you're creating your own. What I like to do is have always 2 groups. So today I'm using the pinks and the greens as a group, and then I'll be using the teal and aqua as a group. Okay, so I like to start with one group of colors, in this case the bright pink with the blush and the 2 greens, and I design with that. And after the first ring, then I bring in the teal and aqua for that pop of color, incorporate it with some of the original colors, and then I finish off with those main colors. So if you are wanting to create your own palette, think about that. Some colors that really look nice together that you can divide and kind of use your blues first and then your oranges, for example. Okay. And I always like to have a soft color, which I call my highlighter color, and that I always place second in my palette. So sometimes that will be white, or it could be a bright yellow or blue, but it will complement the first color and just really lighten and pop and brighten things up. So I hope that gives you a little bit of information if you are creating your own palette today. Okay, so you can go ahead and set up your station. You'll see here I've got my tools largest to smallest, and same with my rods, largest to smallest. I also have some Q-tips. If you have the DIY kit, you will have Q-tips as well. And then I've just gotten a reusable container with clean water, and this will be to clean up if we do make any mistakes or want to change anything, okay? And then I've got my paint pod ready to go here. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just do a little bit of practicing. In your DIY kit, you've got a black cardstock paper. If you're following along on your own, then go ahead and grab any kind of cardboard paper if you want to do some practice with your tools before you begin on your mandala. This will be about an 1.5 to 2 hour project. So you definitely want to get comfortable, throw a pillow behind your back if you need. Make sure you have a drink, a tea, a coffee, a wine. I am trying a refresher drink this morning so that my voice can be nice and strong for the talking. And we will jump in and talk a little bit about the tools and the paint and how to apply them to the surface. And then we will get started on the 6-inch mandala. The other thing too I like to mention is when you are working, the higher you can bring your project up to you, the better for your neck and back. I use one of these boxes. I think I probably got it at Michael's, but you could use a cardboard box, some textbooks or big books. And then I have a Lazy Susan with a wood tray on it, but you don't need to have that. It just makes it easier to turn as I work, but having something to lift up your work so that you are bringing it closer to you. And then also good lighting. If you're doing it during the day, by a window if you can. If you're doing this in the evening, if you do have an LED or a desk lamp that you can place over your work, that will really help you a lot too, okay? So the first thing you're gonna do is open up your paints. If they look at all like you can see more than one color or a little bit of water on the top, then just go ahead and take any tool and just give it a little bit of mix. You won't want to add anything to it, but just give each of them a nice little mix. Okay. I am using, as I mentioned, the DecoArt Americana. This is one of the few brands that is perfect right out of the bottle for dot painting. The consistency of the paint is going to be your largest factor in your success with forming your dots and such. So there are different types of acrylic paint. Some are heavy body and some are soft body. Okay, so if you have a heavy body acrylic, so a very thick acrylic paint, you're going to need to add a medium to it to change the viscosity of it so that it is thinner and you're able to get those perfect dots. On the opposite spectrum, if you have a paint that's really soft body and quite runny, then you would want to add a thickening agent to it to firm it up a little bit. So this is really the DecoArt Americana. This really is my best recommendation because right out of the bottle, I don't need to thin or thicken it. It's perfect for dotting. So you can play around with different brands and see what you like. There's no right or wrong, but this definitely is a favorite with the Mandala dot artists today. So the next thing is how much paint do we want on our tools? So we're going to just start off with practicing a few dots. You can use any color you like. So I'm going to use number 1, the cactus flower for this palette, but number 1. And you want to cover your tool nicely. And then you're going to bring it to your surface. You can put your pinky down to steady your hand. I'm holding this like a pen and it is at a bit of an angle. You can go straight up and down or at an angle with the stylus. No right or wrong, whatever you find comfortable. So the golden rule with dotting is that you're going to dip and dot every time and that you're going to kiss the surface. So we are not pushing down on our surface. We are going to lightly just kiss the surface and lift back up. And you're going to see a nice domed dot. This is wet. So as it dries, it will flatten a bit. And coming back to that paint consistency, if it has a peak, it's too thick. And if it just flattens and kind of runs out, it's too thin. So the perfect consistency when you're just kissing the surface, lifting back up, is going to have a slight peak and then it's going to very quickly settle. So you can go ahead, give that a try and just dip and dot a few dots. See if you're getting them the right or the same size. How much pressure you're applying, how much paint you're putting on will all determine that. And then what you can do is dip once, and now we're gonna walk your dots. So this is the exception to the golden rule of dip, dot, is dip once and then continue in a line until your paint runs out or until you have the desired amount of dots. And that is called walking the dots. So on our mandala here, when we create these petals, flowers, petals, we are going to walk the dots around to create that cascading look. Okay, so that's why you want to practice that a little bit. To practice once and then walking the dots in a continuous line until your paint runs out. And you'll see that they gradually get smaller because you're removing the paint. Okay, and so you can play around with your different sizes of tools, give them each a try and see how that feels. At any point, you can go ahead and pause the video or even rewind it if you want to watch something again or hear something again. I'm going to show you the acrylic rod here, and then you can go ahead and pause it and just play around, try your different colors, try the tools. Remember though, you're just kissing the surface, allowing the paint to be pulled off of the tool onto the surface and lifting back up. It is a slow process, so you don't want to do it fast. You want to take your time and just enjoy it. With the acrylic rods, if you want to practice with your third smallest, this would be a really great size to practice with. So this is the third smallest one. You want to make sure with the rods that you have quite a bit of paint. So I'm going to go into my fifth color. My colors here are not in the right order as in the kit, but that's okay. So you're going to really want to dunk them in, go up and down a bit. And when you pull it out, you want to see a peak of paint forming. You want quite a bit of paint. Then you're going to come over and you're going to just very slowly apply a bit of pressure to kiss that down and pull it back up. And again, you'll see a little bit of a peak. Some people say it looks like a nipple or a boob, but yes, it will calm down as it dries and settle. If you aren't using enough paint, then you will kind of have that nipple look. So if you're getting the nipple look, then you don't have enough paint. You want to get quite a bit of paint on there, bring it to your surface, give it a little kiss, and pull it back up, okay? You can reapply on the same dot. So if you did one and you're like, okay, it's not enough paint, dip it again, and you can go right back over top and add more paint onto it. Okay, so try out a few of the smaller rods. We're only going to use one of the larger ones for our center dot today, and then we'll mainly be using the 4 smallest rods, okay? The bigger you go up, the more paint you need. For these, it's hard with your largest rod, which we won't be using today in the little paint pods. It's actually easier in an open palette, or actually pouring in the lid of your paint is a good suggestion too. But we'll be using the second largest today, and then the 4 smallest ones. So the last thing I want to show you is going to be swooshes. These are called swoops or swishes, and you create these using your ball tools. If you do not like the look of that, or you're not liking the way that they're turning out, because they can take more practice, you do have the option today to not use them. The mandala will look very pretty. I'll show you one here in a different color. This is a very similar pattern, And here I have not used the swooshes around. So it's still very pretty. We've still got the cluster. And then it gave us a little bit more room on the edge. So we did a full circle around. So thinking again about creating, not copying, you can really think about making it your own and the look that you want it to have. Okay. Also, at the beginning of the video, I did include still shots of the projects, so you can screenshot those on your phone or tablet and refer back to the finished product if you want to see it as a whole at any time during the video as well. Okay, so I would suggest your white tool, or if your set is different, the middle tool of your styluses, the large end. This is one of my favorite size for creating the swooshes. If you're looking for a bigger swoosh, then you'll use a bigger tip, or a really small one, then you'll use a smaller one. But we are going to use the big side of your middle tool, which is white in this case. And then I also am going to grab the micro tip, which is the yellow tool. But whatever your micro, your very smallest tip is, grab that tool as well. So you're going to want to load up quite a bit of paint. I'm going to use number 2 here. So you want a nice generous amount of paint, and you're going to make a dot, okay? And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to kind of drag from the very top of the dot. You're going to drag it down until the paint runs out, or until you're happy with the tail. So I'm going to go right through the middle of the dot, and I am going to drag that towards myself, gently lifting the pressure off as I come down. There's a lot of fun you can have with the swooshes. You also could make a big dot here. You could even take more paint and add to it. And then you could take your micro tip, your smallest, and again, from the top middle, staying in the middle, I'm going to drag this out from the middle. So you see the body of this one is much thinner when I use the micro tip to drag it, okay? And then some of the dots that you created with your acrylic tools, you could grab on there, being careful you don't smudge in there, and place a dot on one side and try dragging it down and curving it around. We are going to be kind of curving our swooshes today around our flower petals. So you're just putting a dot, you can lift back up, and then for this you are applying pressure and pushing down on your surface, and then gently kind of lifting up as the paint runs out. So swooshes can take some practice, and they also will look different for every artist, which is you, right? Depending on the pressure, how much paint, the way you curve your hand, and there's no right or wrong. There's a lot of different looks that you can have when you create them, and all of them are beautiful. So those might take more practice. You might want to spend more time doing that on your practice sheet before you start. And if you really are not loving that, you don't have to incorporate those today. Okay, so the last thing that I would suggest practicing on here is taking one of the larger acrylic tools away from where your other designs are, making a nice plump dot. And then what I'm gonna do is have you start with your smallest tool. So if in the DIY kit, the yellow with the micro tip, and again, the colors don't matter so much right now. And you're just gonna lightly dip it in and place a dot north at the top, south at the bottom, east, and west, okay? So this is how we're gonna set up the center of our mandalas. And this is a sure way to ensure your spacing all the way around will be okay. Then you can place another dot directly in the middle of those, just dipping a little bit of paint each time. And what you do want to do is you want to wipe your tool off often. the more times you dip it, the more paint it is accumulating and your dots will get bigger. So usually halfway through a round I'm doing, or on a big project a quarter way through, I wipe it off to ensure that it's not getting too much bigger. And then you can go back in between each of these and place another dot. You can control how small or big your dot is by the pressure you're applying, okay? So what we're doing right now is I'm getting you to practice doing the dots around each other in rows so that when you go onto your 6-inch mandala, you've already practiced it once and have an idea. The first time you do something, it can kind of turn out a disaster or not go the way you had hoped. So it's better to do a little bit of practice first before you take it to your project surface, because after you do it once, usually we go, okay, I know what I would have done. So after you've done the first row around, then you can go up to your next tool size, in this case, the pink, and grab another color, and you're gonna do the dot here directly in between two of the previous row. So it's kind of interlocking. And my tip for this, again, you're dip and dotting each time, is to go every second dot all the way around. This is going to help you with your spacing. If you go around side by side, sometimes you can kind of have them pulled one way and there'll be spaces. So if you go every second gap all the way around, and then again, wipe your tool off, and then you can go and fill in the dot in between. So I am using a very little amount. I'm not sticking my tool in the paint pot. I'm just kind of just kissing it really, and then kissing my surface. And when you are setting up your center of your mandala, which often you'll see these rows of dots, my biggest tip would be, if you're not able to accurately place a dot in your next row between two of the previous, then to focus on the row you are doing and ensure that you have equal amount of space as best as you can between each of those, because then as you build it out, you may have two rows that don't match up. But if you focus rather on the spacing being accurate and equal between the row you're on, then on the next row you have a chance to correct that. So now I'm moving up to my middle tool, which is the white here, and continuing to place a dot between two from the previous row. And I'm skipping one so that I can really ensure that spacing is accurate and going around. And like I had mentioned earlier, this one's a little bit smaller. You can dip again and go back over a dot. That's no problem, to kind of make it a little bit bigger if you'd like. So practice that a little bit. You can do more than one if it's taking you a bit more to get the hang of it, but be really conscious of the amount of paint you're putting on your tool and the amount of pressure you're applying. You're just kissing and allowing that paint to be pulled off, okay? And you can go all the way up to your blue and green tool if you'd like as well, and just kind of practice having the dots interlock like that. And then after you're done playing around with your tools and your rods and giving a little bit of practice here, we're going to start the project. So I am going to be walking you through some practice techniques here with the tools and the paint. If you are already have done some dot painting, you can feel free to skip that part ahead till you see the blank wood round, and we'll begin the actual project. If you want to have some tips on how to use the tools and the paint, then hang around for a few minutes, grab some black cardstock or cardboard, and you can have a little practice with me. Okay, so now we are ready to beginner piece. So you can grab your Mandala round here, your wood round, and you want the side with the guidelines up. So I'll just take a moment with the guidelines here to explain a couple things about them. So these are going to be a reference point. So there's no right or wrong. We may be at different lines throughout the project, but you're able to use these as a guideline, right? To help you keep things symmetrical and on track. So when I am looking at this, I am always looking north and south at my main line running up and down, and east and west at my main line running across. That always jumps out at me, and that's how I'm always setting up my patterns with my north-south, east-west dots first, as well as when I go and do designs like this. I always start with my cross lines, and that helps me place it, that I have like a top and a bottom. And then with the circular lines that we've drawn around with the compass, those are a good way to look at each of these sections as a little box. So when we are starting, let's say, a flower petal or placing a big dot for the middle of it, we can either go below the line all the way around, on the line, or above the line. It will depend where you are on your slice, but the important part will be that you're conscious of using these guidelines to make sure that when you're placing your dots or your swishes around, you have a starting place so that it's symmetrical all the way around. The other thing is when we do get into doing some of these flower petals here, we want to make sure that they're equal on both sides. So that is where you can think of these as segments. So both of these sections here, and then same on this side, this would be one segment. So that can help you even planning out a design, knowing that that's the room you have to work within for your sections. And it makes it easier when you place a dot to go, okay, I'm placing here, and then I have this amount of room to work within so that you are staying within a section or a segment. So I just want to give you a little bit of information on why we place these down and some ways that you can use them. So we will get started now. So we are going to use your third biggest acrylic rod. And if you want to go one size up or one size down, again, that is completely up to you, but I'm going to go with the third largest one. And I'm going to start with color number 1. So whether you're doing the Vibrant or the boho palette, if you have following along with the DIY kit, or if you're using your own palette you've created, we're going to start with your color number 1. Okay, so we are going to dip and get a good amount of paint just kind of going up and down, making sure that when I pull it out of the paint pod that I'm seeing a peak form on the end. Okay. And then we're going to come over directly on the middle to place the dot. I'm just going to show you a trick. I just thought of a tip. If you are feeling nervous about getting it directly on the center, you can size down to a smaller rod, take that over, and place it on the center. That way you can look and say, okay, hey, I got it right on, it's good, or oh, it's a little to the left. Then you can take your bigger tool, knowing where you've placed that dot already, to ensure that you like where you have it. And then just lining that peak up and slightly applying a little bit of pressure, just kissing. If you do have an air bubble, if you just slightly turn your tool in your hand, it will smooth it out nice. If you went ahead and did that and your circle's not perfect, load it up again and just very slowly apply a bit of pressure to spread it out a bit, so that you can get it perfect the way you like. Okay, and again, if you are not seeing a nice dome form, you may not have enough paint. So go ahead and gather more paint on your tool so that you can really get a nice amount. And then I am using a baby wipe to wipe off the excess paint as I go on my tools. You could have a cup of water and then use a paper towel, a fiber cloth, an old sock, anything you want to clean your tool off as you go. So now we are going to do some dots around our center. And so I am going to use the middle tool, which is the white, the large end. And I'm going to go to color number 2, which is my highlighter color. And I am going to use my lines. So you have 2 options. You can use the space in between your lines or your line. And I'm going to go right on the center of the line. I'm going to place a dot north, south, east, and west. And I am not going to touch the middle dot. I'm going to place it just above so it doesn't bleed into the middle dot. So we're just going to swirl or up and down a bit of paint, and we're going to go slowly, kiss the surface and pull up. So I'm going to go north, south, east, west, and I've got my first dots down. So now I'm going to go ahead and in the center, I'm going to fill in a dot here. On many of my designs, I do start with my smallest tools like we did on the practice sheet and build it out. Because this is a beginner's tutorial, we are starting with a little bit bigger of tools. It will make it a lot easier for you to get the hang of in the center. Okay, so I have placed 8 dots. This is a 16 segment stencil, and that is my preferred stencil to use when I am creating designs. And then we're going to go one size up to the blue, which is your second largest ball, the large end. And we are going to go to our color number 3. And we are going to place a dot above on the next row in between the previous 2 dots. So I am again going to use the line to place it right on the center, which also would be directly in between this segment. And I'm going to place it north, south, east, west, maybe not in that order. It just ensures that our spacing is correct. And then between these. And then once we have done, we're going to do one more row. And then what I'll do is I will give you 2 options to fill in that extra space that we have. Okay, so just like so. I also am going to show you if you do make a mistake. So let's say I place this dot here and go, oh no, it's in the wrong spot or it's too big. You can grab a Q-tip. You're going to wet it with clean water and just roll the excess water off on your skin. And then you always want to take your Q-tip to the base and you're going to roll up and away from the rest of your project. You're going to roll as you go and it's going to get the majority of your paint. And then you can, wet the other end and just finish kind of cleaning up any of the leftover paint. Let that dry before you put paint on it. Okay, so any mistakes, wet a Q-tip, roll out the excess, and then just roll as you come, always away from the center of the project. And that will be a pretty easy way to clean up any mistakes that may happen. So next we're going to go to color number 4, and we're going to use our largest stylus, which is the green. So we're going to gather some paint, and we are going to again go on the center line directly above it. And you want to dip and dot each time so that you're having the same size dot. And if you do feel like your dots are getting too big, then you can wipe off your tool and start with it clean again so that your dots are able to stay the same size. Okay. And you will notice that I've come to the first circle drawn on here. My dots are kind of coming just over it and they look pretty similar all the way around. So we know that it is symmetrical so far. So there's two things we can do because we do have quite a bit of extra space here, is we actually could fit on this row another dot the same size on the other line, and it would be directly above our previous row, which is okay. The other thing you could do is you could size down one tool size and do a smaller dot in between these, which is still going to make a concentric symmetrical circle because it still is a pattern. So you could do either or. The other thing is you could take your micro tip tool and in the same color or a different, you could place just a little dot in between those just to kind of fill up some of that negative space that we're seeing. So for our first and second row, I would definitely use the micro tip because it's just a little bit of space. On the row we just did, we have more room, so you definitely could size down one tool size and just do a smaller dot in between. Mine is a little bit wonky over here, so it's really up to you how you want it to look. So there's an example of both, doing a micro dot in between or doing a large dot all the way. And I actually am going to clean this guy off. So I'm just rolling the paint towards me and then taking a clean one again just to pick up any other paint, because this guy really was quite far down compared to the others. And then I'm just gonna make sure that's dry and just gonna redot him out a bit. The center of your mandala can be the hardest because usually those are the smallest dots you're making. But keep in mind of the 2 foot rule. So hold, if you pick up and hold your mandala 2 feet away from you, you won't see any of those little blemishes that may happen. I'm going to show you this one here. This one here, I've used the largest tool rod to make the center and then just did 2 rows around. So that's another option too. The bigger the center is, the more circumference you have. So you might want to do a bigger center with just 1 or 2 rows around. This one here, I've done the second largest center and then done 4 rows around it, all pretty close together. So there's not a lot of negative space between them. So the possibilities are endless for sure. So we've got the center of our mandala done, okay? And we've used our first 4 colors. We are going to, after we're done this and it dries for a bit, we're going to come back and do some top dots. So that is when you take a dot and place it on an existing one that's dry, and that can create a lot of dimension and vibrancy within your piece. So for this one here, my idea is to come back with color number 2, the blush, over the cactus once that dries. And if you're doing the vibrant one, and you've used color number 1, the magenta in the middle, my idea would be to come back and do color number 3, the lavender, or even color number 4, the metallic, over it. Okay, so now we're going to take our 3rd smallest acrylic rod, so your 3rd smallest, and we are going to create these nice big dots that we're going to form petals around. So we're going to be doing 8 of them. We're going to create one north, south, east, west, and then one in between. So these segments I talked about earlier, if you think of each of these as one section, we're going to place a dot directly in the middle of it. So we're not trying to place this in between the previous row. We're trying to place it directly in the middle of our sections here. And we're going to use color number 1 again for this. So we're going to go up and down, getting a nice amount of paint on that acrylic rod. You can put your pinky down just to make it steady. And then you're going to kiss that surface. The more pressure you apply, the bigger it will be. And the less pressure you apply, the smaller this dot will be. So it's up to you. And also go ahead and move your round or the surface you're using with you as you work. It definitely helps to have it centered towards you. And we're just going every second line, or if you think about it, directly in the middle of this section. This dot, you can see it's kind of rippled. I didn't get enough paint, so I'm just going to redip and just slowly add some more paint to him. And if you find you have a dot that's smaller than the others, then you can load up your paint, go and just push out a little bit to make it even. So you're dipping and dotting for each one there. So now we're going to build the petal around it. So I'm going to take the smallest tool, which for me is the yellow one, and we are going to actually use the large end. So what we're doing is we are going to create a big dot here with the large end, and then we're going to flip it over and use the smaller side and walk the dots down around the circle to frame it. So you can use the larger end of your smallest tool. I'm going to use color number 2, my highlighter color, and I'm going to place a dot directly above this one on the middle of the line. And I'm going to do that for all of them. You can do it in whichever order you would like. And this is also where you have another chance to ensure that it is symmetrical and lining up, is you can see where your circle guidelines are. My dots should all be right above my line. Again, you may be in a different spot and that's okay, but just look, is it on a line, under, above? And if it's not, this is a chance to correct that and just ensure you're placing your dot on the same spot above each of your previous dots by using the guidelines. So maybe you have a bit more space between your previous dot and that on one of them, but just a chance to look, find a line and make sure those are lined up all the way around. So now I'm going to flip my tool over to the small side, which for this one is that micro tip. And this is the exception to our golden rule of dip, dot, where we are going to dip once, and then we are going to walk them down. And I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to come to this one facing me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I like to turn my piece each time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you're counting it out to ensure that you have the same amount of dots all the way around. I really like this first one to be quite small, so I use the micro tip. I wipe it off often so that the paint's not building up, and then I'm just getting a little bit, just like 1 or 2 little scoops in. So you can do that all the way around. You could do both sides at the same time if you want. So up here we just did the right side. Then we could go to the left and that guy's complete. I just prefer when I do it, because I'm right-handed, that I do the right side at the top and I do the right side at the bottom, and then I turn it. And there we have it. So we've got our first row in. So now I'm going to skip a size, and I'm going to go to my middle tool, which in this case is the white. I'm going to use the large end, and I'm going to go to color number 3, and I'm going to place a dot directly above the previous row on the line, and it should be bigger because we want to create a nice full look for this petal or flower petal. And I'm going to do that all the way around. Again, I can kind of look at my guideline and see where I am and that it's pretty equal, either on the line, above, under the line, all the way around. And then I'm going to flip the tool over and to the smaller side, and I'll walk the dots with that smaller side. So I'm going to dip once, not too much paint. And for this here, you can interlock them between the previous row. So you're going to put the first dot down and kind of in between the other two. And then if you do the same all the way down, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're getting 6 again. So we're just going down and kind of tucking it in and then placing them in between the previous dots on the previous row we did. And it should be 6 dots again because we had 6 on the previous one. Really important to clean your tool often here, especially if you are getting quite a bit of paint on it, because you do want to have enough room to do one more row. And then also thinking of your segment or section here, we want to keep it in these lines here. And when you are trying this out, this can be one of the tougher ones to get. So just take your time and don't worry too much. Like if your dots aren't interlocking with the previous ones, just count 6 down or 5 or 7, however many fit onto yours. Clean the tool often to keep them smaller. And if they are a lot bigger, then maybe you're just going to do 2 like this and not add a third one. Or maybe you're going to do 3 and then that will complete the petal on this part of the design for you. So now I'm jumping up to my largest tool. I'm skipping a size again, and this is the green, the large end. I'm going to use color number 4, and I'm going to place a dot again directly above my previous 2 middle dots, right on the center guideline. And again, being conscious of where my guidelines are, if I'm placing those on one of the circular lines directly under it, but just making sure more or less that I'm keeping that in mind to ensure my design is symmetrical. Mandalas have a lot of symmetry to them. That is one of the reasons they are so pleasing on the eye. A mandala in Sanskrit means circle. Man actually means to mark off, and la, the center point. So they are used in a lot of cultures and religions for spiritual reasons. There's also Carl Jung that introduced mandalas into therapy, which is really well known, and using them to create from our soul, but also for meditative practices. So you can see now that you're about halfway in that it's quite relaxing. It's very repetitive. You're engaging your left and your right mind, right? Because you're thinking about your color palette and your design, and then you're also just creatively letting it flow. The most beautiful mandalas I see artists create, and I know my best work comes when you get into that flow state where you really just let your mind relax and let it just flow. Don't overthink it, and let your hands create what it would like. So you can see kind of the benefits for just distressing your mind, using your hands, and just having kind of a break from our busy world and the stressors that tend to come into it. So that's one of my favorite reasons for doing this hobby. And then you've also got just such a beautiful piece of artwork afterwards. So to create this petal, you can do one of two things. You can flip your green tool around to the small end, or you can go a little bit bigger than that to our middle tool, which is what I'm going to do, I think. The white one, the middle tool, because now this dot is so big, if we use the small end, it may just look a little too tiny. So now, see, that's such a nice size there. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm counting my 6 and I'm interlocking them down in between. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Also thinking of our lines here and trying to stay within that box so that I know it will all be symmetrical. You'll definitely want to clean your tool often for this one, and this guy had quite a bit of paint on it, so it's okay, but I'm going to flip to the small side now to walk the rest of it so the sizes are still gradually decreasing like that. So if that ever happens to you where you don't have enough paint to finish the line you're on, or there's an air bubble, you can just grab a smaller size to finish walking the dots around. Okay, so now we are going to move on to the next part. I am going to do some swishes, swoops or swishes, you can call them either, around each of these. If you want to give that a try, follow along. If you don't want to do the swishes and you want to keep it just as is, then you can skip ahead a little bit to the next part. So for the swishes, I am going to grab the middle tool, which in this kit is the white, and use the large end. I'm going to be using color number 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to start on one side of your center line, and we're going to drag the swish down. And then for the other side, we're going to start on the other side of the line and drag it down. So just make sure that you're leaving the guideline here that's running on the center of these dots. Leave it open and just start on either side. If we can't drag it all the way down and in, you could just drag it to kind of the middle of here. And then when we do the other one, we can drag it down and kind of join it that way too, which looks really pretty. So I'll show you here. You're going to get some paint. Again, you want to be generous, more so than when we were just walking the dots. I like to turn my piece slightly to the right. I am right-handed. And I'm going to place a dot here. I'm going to get a little bit more paint because we are going a fair way. So for this, I am putting my hand, my fist firmly down, and I am pushing onto my surface. And I'm going to kind of just start dragging it. And then I'm just slowly going to go till it fizzles out. So that one ended about there. I'm happy with that. If you did want to have it come right in down, then you grab your micro tip, your smallest tool, and you can just take the paint and continue it down further. Okay, and then I'm going to do the bottom here. So I'm just slightly turning it to my right again. I'm going to place a dot on the right side, my right side of the line. And then I'm going to pull it down until it runs out. Okay, and then I'm just going to keep turning my piece and doing that. So you can do one continuous sweep until it runs out, or you can grab your micro tip and drag the tail further if that's the look you like. You also can drag it a little bit like I just did and then go back to the top and then keep dragging again. And sometimes that will give you a little bit of a longer one. If you want to go back to your practice paper and just practice your swooshes a little bit more if you're trying it first, you can do that. You could even build a petal on your practice paper so that you're practicing curving it around. And then if you do have any like this one that weren't perfect, just grab your micro tip and you can use that to manipulate the paint. I also love using these needle points to kind of finesse my swooshes if need be. I buy these at the dollar store and there's actually two. This is a thicker one. My thinner one just broke, so I need a new pack, but I think they're, I don't know, $1.25 or $2. And these are just amazing for pulling the paint. So now I am coming here and I'm gonna bring this down and see, I kind of almost make the tips touch, not quite. So depending how you've done it, you might have them touching at the tail end between like that, or you might have a little bit of space. Again, it's your creation, so it depends on which look you like and you're happy with. Okay, so we have got those initial swooshes done. If you do follow along dot painting or Mandala artists, you will see a lot of brush strokes happening right now. So I'll show you, this is a piece in the boho color palette. And these petals here that I've created, I have used paint brushes for, not the dotting tools. And same here with this one. I've created this using paint brushes. And I'll show you some of those right now just for kind of an FYI for your information. But these are called fine liner paint brushes. These ones here, the brand is Jerry Q. So you can see they are liners. And they come in different sizes and they have a very long, thin tip. So this is how some artists create these paint lines. There's also the art supply store that has these ones here. So a really nice hold for you. And then you can see how much bigger that is. So when I'm doing a huge round, I would be using a bigger one like this. So the swooshes create these really cool, or the styluses rather, create these really cool swooshes and swoops. If you're looking for a more full-bodied or longer one, then these paint brushes are how we are creating those. So just a little bit of information for you as we're going along here. So now we're ready to start the next element of our design. If you have done the swoosh along with me here, a nice way to cap it off is grabbing your largest stylus, the green, and again, going in color number 2, you can just place a dot on the center line at the top there. And that just closes it off nicely and gives it a little finishing touch. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to keep extending our design out. So here we've got some nice big dots created with the acrylic rod that we can create another petal on. If you did not do the swooshes, which is lovely too, like this one, it's just going to come in a little bit closer to your previous row. And you might just want to do one small dot under your big dot rather than here I had done 2. The reason I'm placing a little dot under my big one is just to lift the petal up a little bit and push it back. If we do this big center dot right in there, it can get a little bit tight. Sorry. It's nice to have a little bit of that negative space and just bring it out, kind of mimicking like a flower would. There's endless designs you could do. This is using the vibrant color palette that some of you that are following along with my DIY kit. With this one, this is a completely different design, but this one I've just done one flower petal. I've done some swish bursts in between, and then I've done several rows of dots around just to kind of let it be a little standalone burst. So that's a really great idea as well. And I have one more here I think I was playing around with. This is like a rainbow one. So this is a little bit more of an eclectic look. The dots aren't as precise. And then I've done a backwards swoosh where I've started, instead of at the top going in, I've started the swoosh at the inside and brought it out around. So that really gives it more of like a starburst look. So there's lots of different ideas that you can do, which is all the fun. So let's grab our smallest acrylic rod, and we are going to use color number 5 now. We are going into our next set of colors. And again, you want to use your guidelines now to make sure you're starting at the same place. So the idea is in between our petals here, we're going to create the next element in our design. And so we're going to use the center line, and we can leave a little bit of space in there. So for me, I'm going to place the next dot right above this circle line all the way around. And I'm just looking ahead to make sure that that will work, and it does. So I'm gonna use color number 5. It's an acrylic rod that we're using. I'm using the smallest to start. So I'm just dipping up and down. And then I'm gonna come over here and place a dot directly above my line, the circle, and on the center of the line coming down. So again, you could do the north, south, east, west, or you can just do in between each, because we have pretty set sections now that it's easy to see that. And I am placing it right above my guideline there, so kind of actually in this little row, so that it's the same all the way around. And then I'm going to size up. I'm going to stay in the same color number 5. And I'm going to size up to my second smallest rod. And I'm going to dip in, and I'm going to place a dot directly above that is slightly bigger. So now I'm going to take a bigger rod. These big circles we created around the petal in our first row, we had used the fourth largest acrylic rod. So I'm actually gonna go up one more size to the 5th biggest one. So if you have the clear, or if you are using the colored rods, I haven't shown those at all yet, but they're a pretty standard set as well. That would be the blue color, because I just want it to get bigger as we build it out. So I'm still going to use color number 5, but again, you have all of the freedom to create how you would like, so you could use different colors. My thought is color number 6 is a lighter kind of shade of color number 5 in the palettes that I'm curating, so we are going to top dot it with the lighter shade once this dries. So I'm gonna dip. This is a bigger rod, so I do want to get quite a bit of paint on the end of that so that it's creating a peak. It's hard to show you, but when I'm lifting it out, you want to see like a string of paint coming off of the bottom of it. and I'm gonna place that directly above my previous two on the center line. And again, looking at my guidelines. So I actually have a guideline going around, and I'll be placing it right above to ensure that I am symmetrical on all sides. And that way, if you did get off track at all, this is your opportunity to just kind of redo that. So you can really see how this is starting to build, and I'm sure you're getting very excited now. I know that is my absolute favorite part of creating mandalas, is how they evolve as you continue. Sometimes when you start, you don't even like it, but as you continue building the design elements and seeing it sprawl outward, it gets very exciting to see it change and evolve. So now we're going to create some petals around these bursts. If you would like, you also could say, hey, I love the look of this, and I just now want to create dots around a couple rows and have this be the design. That's beautiful too. But my idea here is that we're going to just create a little bit more of a petal, and then we're going to go in between it with these 4 dots here. So I'm going to start with the smallest tool again, which is yellow in this pack, and I'm going to use the large end. I'm going to use the highlighter color again, so color number 2, and I'm going to place a dot on the center line directly above the one we just did. This can be telling when you go to do this. Sometimes you realize, oh, your previous big dot is not directly centered. I would still go ahead and make sure that this dot, sorry, I'm turning it so much here, that this dot is centered. And then we can flip the tool around to the micro tip, and we're going to walk the dots again. So you want to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're getting one more than when we did this before because we are using a bigger center. So it's a bigger circumference. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it looks like 7 is a good number. And just make sure that you're wiping this off often, because we do want this to be nice and small and tight around. So now I'm moving up to my middle stylus, which is the white one for me. I'm using the large end, and I'm going to use color number 6. So that's kind of my highlighter color for the teal and aqua in both of these pieces. And so I'm going to dip it, and you probably can guess, we're going to place a nice plump dot that should be bigger than the previous row, directly above on the center line. So now we're going to do the last part of our petal here, and I'm going to do something a little bit different here, is that we're going to do a cluster of 3 dots just to really give that some height. And even if you are not planning to do the swooshes, on here I've done 1, and then I did a separate cluster of 3, which is also pretty. But on here you could still do what I'm going to show you here with the cluster of 3 to just raise this up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the blue, and we're going to go on either side of your line. So we aren't going directly above the previous row. We're going to place a dot on the right and on the left, leaving that white line so that our dots aren't touching. We're going to use color number 5, the same color as the big dot. And we're going to get some paint. We're going to go on the right side, and we're going to go on the left side. And then you can kind of dot over them just to make sure they're the same size and fullness, and that you're happy with how they look, just like this. So now you've got a dot on either side of the line. We're gonna take the largest tool, the green, using the same color, number 5, and we're gonna place a nice big dot directly on the center line above those. So it essentially is creating a triangle. And that's gonna just really finish off our design quite nicely. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Say hi, introduce yourself, let me know if you're enjoying this. Let me know if there's anything you'd like to see in future tutorials, or something that you would have liked to see, or even something that you really enjoyed from the tutorial today. If you have pictures of your project, I would love to see them. Tag me on Instagram or Facebook at Dots of Love Canada. You can also just message them to me, to my inbox. Like I said at the beginning, if you have any questions, that's a faster way to reach me, is shooting me a direct message on Instagram or through Messenger with Facebook. I am so happy to answer any questions you have. And then getting back to our project, now I'm going to use the middle tool, the large end of the white, and I'm going to walk down my dots. Because we've done the 2 above, it's taken up that first space, so that's why we're having 6 instead of the 7 dots now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And as usual, clean your tool off often if your paint is building up. So now we've got our second petals down. We're gonna add another element. What we're gonna do is we're gonna do these 4 clusters. And this is an element I use in a lot of my work. I really like the way it looks. And it definitely can fill up quite a bit of space. So we're gonna be doing this directly above our initial petals here, in this space here. So we're going to use the center line to place our bottom and top, and then we're going to place the middle on either side of the line. I'm going to use the second smallest acrylic rod. If you have more space, you could use the third smallest acrylic rod. And I'm going to come back to color number 1 because I want to tie in the center again. For this, I do recommend doing all the way around just the bottom, and I'll explain why. But we're gonna start above our, oh, sorry, my board is flipping here. We're gonna start above the dot from our previous row. We're gonna start slightly above it. And again, you could use a guideline. So I have a circle guideline going around here. I am probably going to use the, not the middle of it, but just slightly kind of above it, because I want a little bit of space between those two. So I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm going to place a dot on the same line, whether that's on it, above it, below it, all the way around. And you can already see how that color is just popping. It's the same one as our center color. And if you're choosing a different color, that's fantastic too. Okay. Now we're going to place a line to the right, or a dot, sorry, to the right of our line. I don't want to go touching to my bottom dot, but I'm just going above it and on the right side of the line. I'm dipping and dotting every time, so I have the same amount of paint. You can re-go over a dot if you need to. You can clean your tool off if you feel like they're getting a lot bigger. And the reason that I like to do all of the same one at a time rather than the other way is that if I place that bottom dot and then go right and then go left and then go top, everything's okay, but you could run into the paint merging into each other because it's so close together. Even within the same line of acrylics, depending on the color, because the pigments and the viscosity can be different for them, some can be a little bit runnier, and especially with the metallics. So if you're doing the vibrant palette and maybe you've decided you're doing the metallic color, it really flattens when you put it down. So I find if you do all the bottom first and do all the right first, it just gives it that minute to set, because acrylic paint does set very quickly. It does dry very quickly. And then you don't run the risk of it merging or, melting into each other. So you can do whichever way you like, but that's the reason for why I like to do all of one side at a time. So now I'm going back and I'm placing a dot directly across from the one I just did on the other side of the line. And I'm just turning my work, my piece as I go, so that I can make sure it's nice and centered. And now I'm gonna go and do the top one. So I'm just gonna place, oh, I need more paint. I'm just gonna place a dot up there. At this point, if you have had your paint pods open the whole time and we're using up the paint, you could find that it's thickening a little bit as we're going. So you could add a drop of water, just like one small drop of water, and mix it in. I don't recommend that, as a rule, because it does change the makeup of the paint. And so it is best to use a flow medium that is meant for that. But for this purpose, it is okay if you find your paint is getting a little bit thick, or maybe you're even doing this outside on a warm summer day, which could certainly kind of thicken up your paint. You could add a drop of clean tap water and then mix it up just to help make it a little bit thinner again. Okay, so our piece is looking fantastic so far. We've got a few different design elements that looks really pretty. We still have an opportunity here to add something else in. This one has come right to the end of our 6-inch round. So we wouldn't be adding in, like on some of these, the rows around. If you have done a more tight knit one, or you haven't done the swoops, and so your design is in a little bit, then you certainly could do a row around. And when you do that, it's really easy because you're able to use the end of your surface as the guideline. And I generally use my third smallest acrylic rod when I'm making big dots around the outside. And then as I place them, it doesn't matter where you start. With those, I usually just place one and then I continue turning my piece, being aware of how much space is in between each of them. Then it's ideally the same. And when you come to the end, you might have two that are closer together or a little bit farther apart. You definitely could use your guidelines and place one on every line and then two in between it if you want to make sure that is centered. Another element that's really popular right now in the Mandala dot painting area is a design like this, where you place a bigger dot. So to do this, I've used my large green tool, placed a nice dot above my petal on each section. And then I've taken the large end of my blue tool and walked it away the same amount, I think 5 or 6 dots on each of these. And it kind of just creates this nice cascading look. And then there was room for another row below it. We also could add a swoosh, which I think we will probably do on either side of this petal here. So you can really have a lot of fun with different design elements. If you are not doing swooshes and your design has come out this far, then you could even do a little cluster on either side here of 3 dots. For these ones, I load up like either the large or the blue or the green, and I go 1 and then left, right, 1, left, right. So it kind of walks the dot size down gradually. Or you could do a big dot and then flip over and do both of these dip and dot the same size. So there's lots of different ideas. You want to really, create your own piece and make it unique to you. So if we are going to do a swoosh here coming down, I'm going to use the green one this time because we do want it to come farther. And I am going to go back to my color number 2, which will make it the same as the previous swoosh that we did. So I'm going to get a good amount of paint. I'm going to turn my piece slightly to the right, and I'm going to place it just slightly above my last dot there. And then I'm just going to drag it as far as it will go. I'm going to get my smallest tool, the micro tip. On this packet is the yellow. And I'm just going to kind of start in the middle of this swoosh and then finish dragging it out of it. And you can kind of manipulate the curve there. This will be a really pretty look. And just kind of mimicking the previous swooshes that we did. So I'm just doing the right side at the bottom now. And then I'm going to turn this and come back to the top, just setting that dot slightly above and beside, bringing it as far down as I can, and then using the micro tip to finish it off for me. If you need to get more paint and load it up again, load the dot up again, you can certainly do that. And then you can use your micro tip to really just kind of fill out your line and make the point that you'd like. And there we have it. So we've done another swoosh or swoop around, which is really just mimic the previous swoosh that we did. And I think it's just a nice way to frame in our petal. Once this dries, I am going to place some top dots on. So I'll show you that in a minute. And the other thing too is we could go with a smaller size or the same size, and we could do another swoosh around this side in one of our other colors just to add a little bit of that fullness into it. But otherwise, this is pretty much the first layer of our mandala. So you've had a chance to work with the acrylic rods, with the acrylic styluses, doing some different elements like the petals, creating a round, and now you can let it dry, and you could even come back to it, later on in the day or the next day. You don't have to do it all in one sitting, but definitely you'll see adding on some top dots will really help add some dimension. Maybe you're doing this with a friend and you do want to finish it. So one thing you can do is you can actually use a hair blower on the cool setting, and you can blow on it to help the acrylic dry faster if you did want to place some of those top dots. Okay, so we are ready to add on our top dots. Our first layer is pretty dry. And so I'm gonna go ahead and I am going to get, for the center here, I'm gonna use the fourth smallest acrylic rod. So it's slightly smaller than the one we used to create that dot. And I am gonna use color number 2. Again, you could use whichever colors you think will look best. I'm gonna get quite a bit of paint on there so that there's a peak forming when I pull it out of the pod. And I'm gonna place it directly in the center, just pushing down slightly. You could go again. You can make it as big or as small as you want. It's gonna add some nice dimension to our mandala and just tie in the colors nicely to each other. I am then going to get the second smallest rod, and I'm going to use color number 2 again, and I'm going to do a top dot on these ones here. There's 2 ways you could do it. You can do it directly in the center, or you could do it at the bottom center. These ones I'm going to do directly in the center, so I'm just placing as best as I can in the center. I'm dipping and dotting each time, and I am ensuring just to go slow and take my time to line it up, ensure I have the same amount of pressure so that it has the same amount of the first color peeking out underneath it. So you can really see how this is transforming or evolving our mandala, giving it some depth, and dimension. So then I'm going to take the blue tool, which is the second largest stylus, the large end, and I am going to go into color number 6, and I'm going to place a light dot on top of the bottom one of our 3 here. So I'm just placing that right in the middle. You may want to use your middle stylus tool, so the white, if you're using this package. This one here could be quite big. I'm just making sure I'm not offloading too much of the paint. And then you can size up to either your green stylus or to the smallest acrylic rod. Smallest acrylic rod. And we're gonna dip again in color number 6. And now I'm going to go in the center of the dot I had placed. Here you had some freedom if you were placing 1, 2, 3 dots. So you also can choose whichever colors you would like. If you wanted to do a different top dot color, you can go ahead and play around. Because we've waited for our paint to be dry, you also can place one, and if you don't like it, or if you're placing 2 different colors, grab one of your Q-tips, wet it, and just roll it off. It shouldn't mess underneath because it's fairly dry already. So that's a great way too if you want to wait until it's dry, because that way you can play around and test out a few different colors. So now we're going to do a top dot on our biggest dot. So I'm going to use the 4th smallest tool because we had used the 5th to make that. So I'm going to use the 4th smallest. You could even use the 3rd smallest. And I'm going to stick with the theme and go with color number 6 and place it right in the middle. If it's not completely centered, you can redip and go over it again, placing your next dot more to the left or more to the right, depending on how your dot landed. And it doesn't have to be perfect. These are hand painted by you. And so for me, the mandala very much represents yourself and your journey, and we are all flawed. We're not perfect. And so I like that it represents that. And I very much think of myself in the center with my family, my friends, my community, all of the branches around me. You can also think of your life story, right? Sometimes there's a row or a chapter that isn't so great, right? But when you stand back and look at it as a whole, it is really breathtaking and beautiful, and you can see all the hard work that went into that. Perfect. So you can see how this is enhancing already. So now on the 4 cluster, I'm going to use either color 2, like we did in the center, or you could use color 3 or 4, which would look really cool too. And for these ones, I like to do it a little bit different. So I'm going to get the second smallest acrylic rod. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the dots on the bottom middle inside of each of them. So I'll show you what that looks like. Just deciding here which color I want to do. I think I am going to try color number 3, something a bit different here. So I'm going to place it kind of more towards the middle. I definitely recommend for this as well, doing all your bottom, then all your left, then all your right, then all your top, so that there's no chance of the color running. But I'm just going to do one complete one here to show you what that looks like. So you can see I've placed them at the bottom of the circles, and it just gives it a little bit of a different look. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the rest like that. There we go. So now we have all of our top dots placed. You can really see how it's jumping out at you now. And the last thing we can do on this one, if we'd like, is like I had mentioned, we could add another swoop here, or you could even walk some dots on the outside. Again, you can have a lot of fun. You could also add a top dot on this guy here all the way around if you wanted to. This is your piece, so you can have all the fun you want. You could add a top dot on one or all of these rings. When you're adding a top dot, you want to size down at least one. You could even do 2 sizes down if you needed. So I am going to use color number 4, and I am going to use my blue tool, which is the second largest, the large side. And I am going to see what I think about adding another swoosh. So I'm going to start lower down than my previous swish. I'm going to start a little bit lower down. I have this angle to my right because I'm right-handed. And then I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to just slowly drag. It didn't go all the way down, so I'm going to grab my micro tool, starting halfway up, and just drag it a little bit more. It's hard to know when a mandala piece is finished because you really can just keep adding and adding. You can even let it dry and let it sit for a day or 2 and come back to it. And once you know, you'll know. So I do like the look of this. So I'm going to just go all the way around, and I'm going to do a swoosh or a swoop on the sides of my previous one, just to give it a little bit more of a fuller look. So I also can see that there is a little bit of room in here. So if I did want, I could take my micro tip, my yellow smallest tool, or even my second smallest tool, and I could actually place one more dot in there. I'm going to take color number 6 that I had top dotted with, because it's just a nice highlight to that. And I'm just going to place on the line centered underneath a little dot. So this is just giving you an idea of once you're done, quotation, your mandala, of how you can kind of go back and add the tiniest little details that just really make it pop and fill in any negative space, the black showing being the negative space, of course. And that completes our mandala tutorial. Once this dries, I'm going to show it to you again, along with the vibrant one that I showed at the beginning. So here they are. I've wiped off the guidelines with a baby wipe and they are looking stunning. Don't forget to sign the back of your artwork and display it somewhere in your home. I would love to see pictures. Tag me on Instagram and Facebook at Dots of Love Canada. Comment below, let me know how you enjoyed it and what kind of tutorials you'd like to see in the future. Thanks so much. Dots of Love, Colleen.